Hello friends, today in this session we will be discussing how to adapt environment for children with special needs. And before we begin adapting the physical environment to suit the need of each child with special needs, we must remember few things. And the very first thing that we must remember is each child is different and each child's delay or disability will require different modifications. Hence, we should gather as much information as we can about the child and the disability and learn about typical modifications that can be made. This is prior to beginning making adaptations in the physical environment. And how to gather this information? We can gather this information by observing the child, by interacting with parents, by interacting with other adults, by interacting with peers with whom the children like to play, and also talking to the siblings, the brothers, the sisters, anybody who can give us information about the child's need, about the comfort zone of the child, so that we can make the similar kind of adaptations in the physical environment. Let's discuss some general adaptations that can be made in the environment. When you are making adaptations in the physical environment so that children with special needs feel comfortable sitting there, spending time there, engaging with various activities, we should always start with making small changes in the environment. Say for example, a quiet private space for play may help an overactive and shy child. A child with poor vision may benefit from an extra lamp in the play area or maybe in the reading area also. And by removing a rug or a carpet that slips will help a child who has trouble in walking, or a child who might be walking with some aids or equipment, or maybe a child who is using a wheelchair. So once we have decided to make some adaptations in the environment, we should always begin with very small changes to start our task. Then we should never forget to model appropriate behaviors. Say for example, if you want your child to engage silently in reading, then as a teacher or as an adult in their presence, I should also model that behavior. It should never happen that a book is open in front of me and I am talking and reading simultaneously. If I want my students to read silently, I should also read silently so that they can imitate the teacher. And we should also focus on teaching specific words and skills that will show how to find a playmate and how to become a playmate. We all have complained that we don't have any friends. So we should teach our students how to become a friend first. So this is related to that. Then we need to teach our children without special needs how to talk and play with children who have disability, because it is often found that children without disabilities, they indulge in bullying behavior. They make fun of their classmates who are not like them or who have some difficulties, some problems in speaking or writing or walking. So we need to sensitize the children who doesn't have any special needs how to help the children who may have some problems or some challenging. And this can be done by gently touching the shoulder of a child with hearing impairment, because this child cannot listen when you call out their name. So you need to touch their shoulder gently so that you have their attention. Or we can directly look at them while talking so that they can do our lip reading also. Then we need to look for strengths as well as needs. A child with disabilities is a child first. This means that though a child may have some disability, but he or she is a child first and later on a person or a child with disability. Then we can also consult our parents, healthcare professionals and other specialists. And important thing is, we should never be afraid to ask questions, because sometimes parents assume and take it granted that the ECC or the education functionaries will know what to do, and the parents take a back seat in the process of education, we need to involve everybody and give respect to everybody and their opinion. And parents know their children better than anybody else. So it's important to ask right questions to the parents and involve them in the process. Then how to do instructional groupings or arrangements. Instructional groupings is basically when you're planning a group activity with students, that how now today we'll sit in a group of 4 or 5 and do some activities, maybe coloring or maybe solving a worksheet or maybe planning for a project. So how to do these? Some tips for that. For any given activity, there are a number of instructional arrangements from where we can choose, and it could be large groups, it could be a small group, it could be a cooperative learning group, it could be a peer partner where 2 persons sit together and help each other, and it could be a one-to-one instruction, or it could be an independent task. For an inclusive classrooms, any of this modality will work depending how you are forming your groups. If it's a large group, then children with special needs also be made significant part of the group. And format of a lesson needs to be designed very well and very thoughtfully so that every child feels part and parcel of the classroom. If you have a child in your class who cannot listen properly, and your lesson design of a particular class is that you will be speaking more and less of the activities, then in that classrooms the child with hearing problems will not find included. So the format of a lesson needs to be altered to meet the requirement and specific needs of a child by including more opportunities for whole class, and this can be done by adopting strategies like discussions, games, role playing, activity based lessons, experiential lessons, demonstrations, or thematic lesson organization. Similarly, we have a number of teaching strategies to make our classrooms more effective. A change in teaching strategies can influence a child's ability to participate. Say for example, simplifying the directions, addition of visual information, use of concrete materials, examples, sequencing learning tasks from easy to hard, repeated opportunities to practice skills, changes in the schedule of reinforcement, elaboration or shaping of responses, verbal prompts, or direct physical assistance. These are few of the teaching strategies which works effectively in an inclusive classroom settings. Now let's see this, what this cartoon says. This says, do you want me to hand in my book report on CD, DVD or flash drive? The student is asking his teacher, and the teacher says very sarcastically, paper. This might be a sarcasm, a comment on the way our teachers are prepared to teach in the classrooms. Here the students is more advanced. He is not thinking about paper, but the teacher is still stuck to the paper. Now, what should be the curricular goals and learning outcomes in an inclusive classrooms? You know, when you are teaching in an inclusive classroom, you may need to alter your curricular goals and learning outcomes to suit the needs of a child. Say for example, if you are talking about, let's say, categorization of animals or discussing about living and non-living things, then if you have a general aim and goal, curricular goal, the children after this particular class will be able to distinguish between living things and non-living things. And if you have a child with learning disabilities or dysgraphia or dyslexia in your classrooms, then you need to alter the curricular goal a little bit. So instead of writing the whole sentences, the children may be able to match the columns with the specific characteristics of living and non-living things. This way you can do a slight alteration in the activities, in the assignments and curricular goals also, where instead of the child writing the whole sentence, he is showing his or her understanding through matching the columns. And we need to many a times do adaptations, how students respond to our questions, how students turn in their home assignments. And we have seen that sometimes children may understand a concept, but they may need an adaptation in the way they demonstrate their knowledge. Now, use of augmentative communication systems, eye gauge and demonstrations may be better allow a child to demonstrate his or her knowledge and skills. You know the earlier cartoon where the child was saying, how do I give my assignment, maybe on a CD, in a book or DVD, and the teacher's expectation was just of paper. This is very appropriate in this situation. We need to give the learner opportunity to pick and choose his or her comfortable style so that he is able to show, yes, I have learned this particular concept and this is how I want to demonstrate my knowledge and skill. And the student's choice may not always be paper and pen assignments. The child may want to show his or her learning through collage, maybe through a PowerPoint presentation, or maybe through just acting it out. So as a teacher, I need to ask myself, am I ready for this? If not, then it's time to change and make some adaptation so that this particular child also feel part of the classroom. Now, how do I modify the instructional material? Now, instructional material can be physically adapted by increasing the stability. Say for example, instead of having the shoe laces, we can have velcro on the shoes so that it becomes easier for the child to wear and the child becomes independent. And then ease of handling. How can this be done? Adding handles, making materials larger. Say for example, you might have seen a child in your classroom struggling to turn over the pages of his or her notebook. So how can we do that? How can we increase the ease of handling the notebook and the textbook? By adding small stickers on the corner, top corner or bottom corner of the page so that it becomes a little thicker and easier to turn. This way we can increase the ease of handling of notebooks and textbooks. Similarly, we can increase the accessibility by developing a hand splint to hold materials, attaching an elastic card or string to objects so that they can be easily moved or retrieved. Visual clarity or distinctiveness can also be increased by adding contrast or specialized lighting or size. These are few examples of the devices which are easily available nowadays in India also, and not in India, in rural areas also, which helps children who require physical assistance or may have some problem in the hand muscles or movement. Now, few children may need personal assistance also, and a child's need for assistance may range from periodic spot checks to close continuous supervision. Assistance may also vary from day to day and be provided by adults or peers. Now, when we say that personal assistance is required by the child, it never meant that a teacher needs to be full-time available 24 hours or whatever time the teacher is in the presence of the child. The teacher has to spend entire time devoted to this particular child. No, it was never the intention. The intention is a child may need assistance from a teacher to solve a particular task just like any other child sitting in the classroom, and this assistance may be shared with the peers by designing classroom activities in the mode of collaborative learning, peer tutoring, and by involving small group or large group activities so that child's need for personal assistance is also taken care of. And if all the things that we have discussed so far, like response adaptations, environmental adaptations, level of personal assistance, adapting the curricular goals and all, everything fails, that means the child is not able to respond to your efforts and your accommodations, then the last option is to have an alternative activity. That is, whatever activity you have planned for the day and you feel that this particular child in my classes may not be able to participate in this activity, then we'll have to go for alternate activity for that particular child. And how this can be done? Say for example, you have asked your students to write few lines on their pet and you feel that this particular child may not be able to write. So what can be done here in this case? An alternative activity could be, in this case, prior to this particular class, you can ask the child, do you have a pet, and if not, which animal would you like to have as a pet? Find out child's choice, get the picture of that animal and ask the child to label the body parts of that particular animal on a sticker. Paste it in a worksheet. This could be the alternative activity. When the entire class is writing few lines about their pet animals, this particular child, because you have seen that he or she may not respond, and now I need to have an alternative activity. So this could be an alternative to this. An inclusive classroom. Now on your screen, two pictures on one slide which shows in a particular classroom, you can see a child is reading through fingers. That means his or her textbook is in braille, whereas the other children are reading the print, and one child is also writing. So an inclusive classroom provides opportunity to children to do various kind of reading activities simultaneously using various modalities. And in another picture, you see a child using a wheelchair is sitting on the desk along with other children who are sitting on the chair. So this is how a classroom can be made more inclusive. So these are two examples of an inclusive classrooms. Now let's see how children with hearing impairment may be included in the classrooms. Some children with hearing impairment may be able to hear a little, and some may not be able to hear anything. Some may be using some hearing aids to amplify the sound, and some might be learning to read the lips, and some might be using sign language to communicate. So you can see that within the group of hearing impairment, we have got lots of variety and variations. And how to adapt the classroom environment for children with hearing impairment is, we need to focus on the language development, because we all learn language through listening, and for children with hearing impairment, they have got problem in their hearing, so they have some difficulty in learning the language and learning communication and how to communicate with each other. So for this, we can have activities that encourage verbal communication and enhance their listening skills, such as an inviting dramatic play area is a very great way to help children with hearing disabilities. There they can be exposed to language in a natural setting. It's a myth, that a child who cannot hear will not be able to speak. It's a complete myth. A child with hearing impairment may be able to speak properly, may be able to communicate through verbal speech if he or she has got training in speaking, and that we need to understand. Then we can always have a balance language rich activities with other activities that require very little verbal interaction. How can we do this? We can have art activities which require maybe verbal expression of whatever the children have drawn. Then we can have puzzles, we can have block play and sensory activities such as playing with sand and water, and offer opportunities for satisfying and enjoyable play without heavy demands on language or communication. The key here is to have a balance between language expression and other sensory expression. Sometimes it happens that we know that this child needs help and support in developing language. So an enthusiastic teacher or adult may have more focus on verbal expression, but that may be wrong. We need to strike a balance between activities that demand verbal expression and activities which gives a venue to other senses for their development also. Then in the presence of a children with hearing impairment, we need to cut down on background noise, and we need to use material which absorbs sounds like thick carpets, drapes, pillows and other soft material which can absorb excessive sound in the environment. And we need to avoid hard floors. If we have hard floors, then we have to use rugs or carpets or durries at various places, so that the sound by walking on the hard floor can be minimized. And in the presence of a child with hearing impairment, we need to provide lots of visual cues by having constant eye contact before we start to speak and during the communication. That makes a very effective visual clue. And along with this, a gentle tap on the shoulder to gain their attention. And we can also always look at the child when we are talking and communicating to them, so that they can help, they can read our lips. And then never forget that when you are in the presence of children with or persons with hearing impairment, you need to talk in your normal voice, and we need not shout or we need not raise our voice. By raising our voice, we will be drawing unnecessary attention to the communication, which we of course do not want. And we can use pictures a lot so that the children becomes independent. Say for example, you know, you need to sort out after children have played with various games and toys or puzzles. So what you can do is take the picture of the puzzle and paste it on the shelf in the almirah or place where you want that puzzle to be kept, so that children with hearing impairment can match the puzzle with the sticker and place the thing there. By doing this simple modification in the environment, we are making children with hearing impairment an effective part of the clearing up process after using a puzzle or maybe a drawing activity. Similarly, during story time or rhyme time, we can provide earphones for children to listen to stories and music at a higher volume, if we have a child who needs to listen to stories in higher volume. And we can always encourage a child who doesn't hear well to talk about what he or she is doing. Now, how we can do this? We can use who, what, where, why or how questions to encourage them to describe their activities and the materials they encounter. Remember, the children who cannot hear, they can always speak. Use stories, songs and finger plays to increase language skills. The focus should be on using multi-sensory techniques involving multi-senses, and that could be using the fingers, using the verbal expression or maybe sign language, picture cues, etc. And teach children how to interact with each other. You know, communication is an essential aspect of being part of a group, and if child with hearing impairment doesn't know how to interact or gain attention of their peers who are able to listen or doesn't have any other challenges, so then this child will feel part of the group. Otherwise, this child will sit in one corner and feel alienated, not part of the other group. Similarly, similar to children with hearing impairment, we have another group of children with special needs, which are known as children with learning disability. Now, learning disabilities is a condition where children learn things a little slowly because they have some problem with their central nervous system, and the information received by their senses doesn't get processed the way it gets processed in your brain or in my brain. So, the process of information assimilation gets a little altered in children with learning disabilities. But remember one thing, children with learning disabilities generally go the same developmental stages as children without learning disabilities, but they may learn certain skills more slowly. And what are the specific adaptations that we need to do in the presence of children with learning disabilities? In short, this is known as LD. We need to keep things very simple. And how can we keep things very simple? By providing opportunities for children to practice activities over and over. This simply means that if you are giving your class 5 sums to practice, the child with LD may require 8 or 10 questions of similar kind to practice again and again. And we can always break activities into smaller steps. children with learning disabilities may need to see or hear one step at a time instead of long list of instructions. Say, instead of saying, go to the back, open the almirah and bring the book with red cover to me. Instead of giving this complex information or instruction, we can ask the child to, could you please go at the back? And once the child has reached the back, then you can say, move towards the almirah and wait till the child move towards the almirah. Then say, open the almirah, wait till the child has opened the almirah and now give the other further instructions like this. So that simple instructions, small steps the child is able to perform. And we can always shorten activities to match the child's attention span. And limit the number of materials or toys to avoid overwhelming the child with choices. Remember, now we are in presence of children with learning disabilities and the way their brain process the information is a little different from which our brain process the information. So it's always a good strategy to limit the number of toys or activities so that the child has little choices but effective. And we can always announce ahead of time when an activity is about to change or end. Children with learning disabilities may need more time to make transitions between activities. So we need to give them time to change from one activity to another activity. And it is always a good practice to say, we will be moving towards mathematics in 5 minutes. So you can wind up your crayons or whatever activity they are indulged in. And we can give simple instructions before a transition to make moving to the next activity easier. You know, it all depends on a teacher present in the classrooms. How the teacher helps the child in winding up one activity and moving on to the other activity. And we can always demonstrate how to do things. We can show and tell children how to do. If need, we can guide them through hand, through body, through motions or through using ICT also. As children become more confident, more competent, we can encourage them to do more and more activities themselves independently without guidance. This is called scaffolding, which is gradually reducing the support needed by the child from external agencies. And we can provide opportunity to sit near a child who is doing a similar activity. This can give a child with learning disability ideas on how to use and explore the same material. Now, what do you see in this slide? In this slide, we see what's coming to your mind. You might be thinking, I see puppies in this slide. Or you might be thinking, I'm seeing 4 black pups and 1 slightly lighter color pup. In case you are thinking that in this picture, I just see 5 pups sitting on a white background or white cloth, then let me congratulate you. You have really understood the meaning of inclusion. Remember, I told you before deciding about the adaptations that each child is a child first. Later on, he or she is a child with disability or disadvantages. Similarly, here also, each one of them is a puppy first and later on a black color puppy or puppy with slightly light color. So, you know, inclusion is basically all about accepting the child first as they are and later on dividing them into categories. That yes, this is a child with hearing impairment, this is a child with learning disabilities. So, in case you have a class with children with special needs or children with diverse needs, then you need to accept them as children first. Yes, they are children first, they are part of the group to whom I am going to teach maybe language, maybe activity, maybe crafts, maybe computer. And later on think about, okay, this child has this particular need, this child cannot see properly, this child cannot hear properly, this child may have learning disability. So how to modify the activities that I am going to do in the classroom. The true essence of inclusion is acceptance first and later on doing anything else. So I hope now it's clear that in order to make our classrooms more inclusive, in order to make everybody, every child sitting in front of me as a teacher comfortable and participate in the teaching learning activities, I need to first understand the need of the child and then do modifications. And each modifications should begin with very small step, so that as a teacher I also have opportunity to experiment and innovate. So thank you friends.